Welcome to Facts and Facts. Are you living a life built on someone else's beliefs or the beliefs of the community around you? For years, I was. This video isn't just about questioning. It's about the profound transformation that happens when you courageously deconstruct your own foundations. Prepare to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about certainty and discover the incredible power found in embracing uncertainty. During my early years, I lived in a home where religion played a big role in my life. The religious foundation of my life was built on Catholicism, and my mother was the foreman. Calling it a foundation is generous. Our religious practices were inconsistent. We attended church maybe 2 times a year on Christmas and Easter, and I have a vague memory of the hullabaloo surrounding my sister's first Holy Communion. I had absolutely no damn clue what a Holy Communion was or how many came after the first one. Aside from kind of knowing its definition, I had no idea what it meant to have faith or what faith was in a religious context. I knew who Jesus was through overhearing the people around me talking about him and all the pictures around my house. But my only teacher of religion was what my ears heard and what my eyes observed. In those years, the religious practices I witnessed and experienced were very confusing and very, very weird. As an adult looking back on those years, it's still confusing and still very weird. From my first memory until well into adulthood, there was an altar somewhere in our home or in my mom's home. The altar consisted of prayer candles, a bottle of Florida water, Google that if you have to, various Catholic iconographic knickknacks, including a small portrait of Jesus, a crystal ball, and statues of saints. The largest and most prominent statue was that of the patron saint of the sick, San Lazaro, or Lazarus. To add to my confusion and to the weirdness of it all, I witnessed my mother behead chickens and watched their headless bodies run, then flop around our living room, their blood spurting everywhere. I also watched as my mother rolled a coconut around the walls of our apartment and, when she returned to the starting point, smash it on the concrete floor in order to read the pieces. There were also jars of sugar water with slips of paper frozen inside that were in our freezer. I chuckle before I tell people this because of the sublime song Santeria, but that's exactly what my mom practiced. Crystal ball and all. So, in order to develop faith and belief, I guess I was meant to extrapolate from all these intakes and develop a belief system based on all of that. Around 1991, parts of that religious foundation were remodeled, painted over, and relocated after we joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and moved to Provo, Utah. Aside from maybe acceptance and support, I'm unsure what everyone in our tiny caravan's expectations were upon our arrival in Utah. My personal experience was a reality check. Within the first 6 months, I learned I was an outsider at school and a novelty at church. I grew leery of those that did show me acceptance, friends and religious leaders alike. I learned that our religious inconsistency wasn't left behind in New York because we quickly fell into a similar pattern of attendance. No one gave 2 shits whether or not we attended church in New York. But here in Utah? Soon enough, our good standing in the LDS church fell upon my and my younger brother's shoulders because mom decided she would attend as needed. Usually when we needed food or when she needed money for rent. She moved her altar into her room and out of sight, but only moved it after the bishop visited and told her that it was unacceptable and inappropriate in the LDS faith. All this taught me was that there were limits to novelty. Our luster had dulled and was pretty much tarnishing. My in-home example wasn't a credible or viable one. And our acceptance in our new religion hinged upon obedience, and later on in life, fealty to the authority of our church leaders. At 12, 13, and 14 years old, I had no idea what it meant or how to have faith, or in LDS parlance, have a testimony in the church, Heavenly Father, Joseph Smith, or Jesus Christ. My budding teenage independence, my rebelliousness, justified as it might have been because of my home life, and my negative experiences in church, the racism and ostracism, paved the way to my first attempt at developing a belief system of my own. Through my love of science fiction, and probably because of an Isaac Asimov short story I had recently read back then, where humanity evolves to no longer need their bodies and travels the cosmos using only their minds, I began to develop my own ideas of existence. I remember an hours-long conversation with Mindy, a skinny, bespectacled girl who lived in the same group of affordable housing duplexes in West Provo that my family lived in. To Mindy, I fleshed out a deep, universe-centered set of beliefs. I fail to remember the exact words, but I do remember the basic ideas I laid out to a very attentive Mindy. Humans are of the universe. We are special beyond our comprehension. And, other than the concepts and powers our minds grant, God played no role in my philosophy. As I wrote this, I can picture myself in my backyard on a summer night in the mid-90s, sitting cross-legged across from Mindy, who is listening intently, philosophizing from my teenage pedestal. Socrates, I was not. It seems that even from then, possibly even before, there lived within me a desire to fill the hole where a belief system should have resided. However, I possess none of the tools to assist with filling it. Between then and now, there have been a multitude of tectonic shifts and seismic upheavals in my life. Subsequent earthquakes shaped my landscape and filled the hole with a testimony made up of loose sediment and gravel-sized faith. One of the first tremors was a renewed interest in and commitment to the LDS Church. It might not surprise people familiar with the Mormon Church, but there are some fantastical doctrines centered around a star or planet called Kolob. Its closeness to Heavenly Father, and loosely says it's where spirit children come from. My sci-fi antenna perked up when I heard this, and played a somewhat significant part in my reconnection to the faith. The shakeup during that period was intense, to say the least. I read the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants 4 or 5 times, maybe more. I also became the president of my adult institute class. All of that culminated with being sealed in an LDS temple to an eternal companion in what would become a rocky second marriage. My journey of self-discovery through this attempt at self-actualization, latching onto a ready-made belief system, bore fruit. And if by fruit you mean greater self-doubt, anxiety, unhealthy patriarchal thinking, a deeper confusion, and an overall dissatisfaction with myself and with my progress as a human being, I guess it bore fruit. Fast forward to the late 2000s. The internet is nascent, yet quickly becoming the ubiquitous entity it is today. So that means people still went to the library. My doubts and confusion became Google searches and accompanying my children to the library where I would engage in old school searches while they looked for books or did research for a school assignment. My internet searches about the LDS Church, Joseph Smith, and his and their overall history produced answers to my questions and more questions that needed answers. My library searches guided me to different books, one of which, No Man Knows My History by Fawn Brodie, who was excommunicated after the book's publication in 1946, opened my eyes. There was also a show on the History Channel about Freemasonry, and on it, I saw rituals and handshakes that I had done while going through the LDS temple ceremony. What I found didn't necessarily rock the foundations of my faith. It wasn't really there. Learning the truth gave me justification to act upon the feelings that I had been living with for years. Knowing the truth solidified for me my belief that religion was a man-made mechanism of control, and I no longer wanted to be controlled. My spiritual excavation was accompanied by turmoil in my marriage. Well, actually, they were more than just companions of happenstance. They blurred together enough that if I squinted, they coalesced and combined into one big problem. One big problem that led me to unofficially leaving the LDS church. I supported my wife's attendance, but I stopped going. No more callings, no more teaching a primary class, no more being the ward mission leader, no more home teaching, no more ward basketball, and no more tithing. Nothing. Within a year, my status within my ward reverted back to the ostracizing times of my early teens. It didn't help that I started smoking cigarettes again, smoking marijuana again, and occasionally drinking. Within 2 years, my pariah status extended to my family, but only in certain areas. My wife and children's attendance, while sporadic, was still enough for the bishop and the ward to give love and support. She had made a lot of friends and maintained and nurtured those friendships within the ward. Meanwhile, my questions and my doubts and my behaviors alienated me from my church friends. To put it simply, the gals still hung out and the guys kept their distance. Like Fawn Brody, I felt liberated being free from my ties to the church. On the same token, I felt alone and lost because I was once again beginning a journey of self-discovery. That journey led me to making music and the first of many separations from my wife. At 32 years old, I rediscovered my love of performing on stage. A year before, I had discovered I could write rap songs. That discovery led to recording those songs, which led to joining a rap group, which led to performing those songs on stage. The feeling of being on stage and soaking in the energy of the crowd is indescribable. I felt like I had returned home to a place I barely remembered, but immediately knew I belonged there. It was something long lost, you know? The next 5+ years of writing, recording songs, and performing were instrumental in my personal development and guided me to today. In the middle of all that performing and music making, I left my wife. I met another woman. I began writing and recording an album, and I spent several months away from my family. I've taken my lumps and hold myself accountable for all the negative parts of this period of my life. It might be hard to believe, but there were a few truly positive and transformative things that happened during those few months. I found affirmation and validation of who I was. I found confidence in who I was. I found peace with who I was. Regardless of who I was with or the circumstances of why I left, I became positively certain and certainly unashamed of who I was as a person. I eventually returned home and I reconciled with my wife. The years following my return were filled with ups and downs. The downs eventually caused me to stifle and in some ways bury the person I had discovered. The ups were few and far between and did not strengthen or validate that person. Yet, I never lost that person. I may have been lost in other ways, but I never let go of the essence of what I had found in myself, the confidence and peace. I believed in myself, and I believed I would someday become more. In my last video, I alluded to attending therapy. After a rough 13-year marriage and the lost feeling dangerously close to consuming me, I sought the guidance of a therapist. I had long since come to terms with leaving the LDS church. I no longer believed in the church's teachings and, until now, had not publicly disavowed its conception and its long line of supposed prophets, especially Joseph Smith. My reasons for attending therapy ranged from the grief of the divorce to figuring out whether I was a narcissist or not, a label my ex-wife described me as over the prior 8 years of our marriage, to uncovering everything else I had piled on myself in order to bury the person I had previously discovered. I came to realize that at the core of everything, there was still an undeveloped belief system. Finding what I valued and my purpose in life has been work. Sifting through 40 years of detritus, all the learned behaviors that contradicted or counteracted what my mind knew I believed, then fortifying my beliefs by changing my actions and behavior wasn't going to be an overnight thing. I attended 2 years of dedicated weekly therapy and 2 years of dedicated daily changes in personal practices. In those 2 years, I found I believed in kindness, equality, acceptance, honesty, hard work, dedication, loyalty, being present, and being genuine. I found purpose in my career and in fatherhood. While I know many of, if not all, those beliefs can be found in religion, I knew that I had held those beliefs from childhood and independent from religion. I had navigated certain times of my life using those beliefs as guideposts. The times I hadn't are the times I deviated and went counter to them. To use religious vernacular, it was a revelation uncovering my long-held beliefs. I began to feel more confident. I felt a renewed optimism in the direction I was going in. Like so many of us, life changed when the COVID pandemic struck in March of 2020. Therapy sessions lasted through the year. We switched to telehealth appointments, but those became more and more difficult to schedule, so our sessions were limited to every other week. Then something happened after the beginning of 2021 that, depending on your perspective, could be taken negatively or positively. I was promoted at work. I had worked 2 jobs from the time of my divorce until the promotion. Simply put, the loss of income meant I wasn't able to afford therapy after May of 2021. From a career perspective, the promotion was an obvious positive. From a therapeutic perspective, the promotion became a clear negative. For 4 years afterwards, I trudged through life hanging onto and living, as best I could, the belief system I had discovered during those 2 years. I struggled though. Not as badly as I had pre-therapy, not in the least. However, I knew all along that I needed to have consistent long-term therapy. With my therapist's help, I had done some rewiring. Without her help, it was obvious during these past 4 years that I had a lot more rewiring to do. Early on, I began to deconstruct the religious foundations of my life, which was code for the belief system I would construct the rest of my life from. The problem I had with deconstruction is that I didn't have any materials ready to reconstruct the foundation with. I experimented with different ideas, philosophies, and I tried to go back to religion, but nothing stuck or was strong enough to support the weight of the life I was building above. For many years, I operated with a feeling of uncertainty, with brief moments of clarity and foundational validation. It wasn't until I decided to go to therapy that I made headway and true progress. Through therapy, I discovered there was a set of core beliefs that were the forms of my foundation. They weren't temporary like in the real world. Those beliefs had been there all along, and therapy showed me I could rebuild a stronger foundation. Unfortunately, due to circumstances out of my control, I stopped going to therapy. I'm happy to let you all know that I'm back in therapy. 2025 has been a transformative year. Changes in and around my life prompted me to do what I had known I needed to do for 4 years. In a sense, I had become lost again. My purpose in life, once my career and fatherhood, had taken a huge blow, and I am unsure what my purpose is now. My beliefs weren't translating into building and nurturing my relationships. I have grown uncertain again, and uncertainty has been a thorn throughout the years, right? For some of us, we recognize the need and choose to do the hard work. For some of us, we recognize the need, but for different reasons, we can't act upon them. For a vast majority of us, it isn't even on our radar. All I know for sure is that I am in need of guidance. So, in May, essentially 4 years since my last appointment, I had my first therapy appointment. It isn't a walk in the park to take the steps we need to take to find the help and guidance we need, then take the steps we need to heal. For too many years, I was shown that certainty came packaged in the promise of a savior or higher power. That promise produced self-doubt, anxiety, confusion, and unhealthy thoughts and behaviors. What I am certain of is that my uncertainty can change to certainty by embracing it, then taking on its challenge. Thanks for making it to the end. If you haven't already and you like my content, please like and subscribe to help my channel out. There are also links in the description to support me on other platforms, or shoot me a tip on Venmo if you want. Doing one or all of the above is greatly appreciated. Stay engaged.